Hey, buddy, not feeling well?
Oh my gosh, I am so tired.
Hey, what's the matter, champ?
I got the alert fatigue, bro.
Danny Akatsuki. I'm an evangelist here at Splunk, and we're going to be talking free tooling, the Splunk Cloud Attack Range. Joining me are all my guests off to my right on the screen. So the reason that I wanted to do this episode is so far, we've talked to people inside of Splunk, which Doug Brush and Ryan Kovar and things like that, and we've been outside at least once with Mr. Dave Kennedy from Trusted Sec, just talking about IR in general. But one of the things that struck me coming to Splunk is that, we have so much security talent here. And so I know, and I've always said that I've always thought of Splunk as a security company. And I think the mark of any good security company is like, what are you doing to give back to the community, right? Like, we all have stuff that, we have products, we have things that we use to pay the bills and things like that. But it's always nice to have, some good open source things, to have some good meat for people to chew on that they don't literally have to pay for. And so I started asking around as I got here back in November, and I wanted to get to know, like, what are the big things that, like, I should learn as now an evangelist, not so much hands behind the keyboard security guy anymore. And the one name that kept coming up over and over and over again is Jose's team. You have to talk to Jose's team. Splunk, he's doing stuff with cloud. And as soon as I hear attack range, my ears perk up, because I've seen the whole threat emulation range thing try to be done like 1,000 times since I've been in security. And I've only been in security, I don't know, maybe 10 years, 8 years by this point. And I've seen it. People have tried to do it. I've seen a lot of really good starts, but not so much on the follow through. There was a range with another company that I worked for. But now this actually seems like a useful thing, B, a well-maintained thing. It's not something that, like, you hear about and you kind of got to go blow the cobwebs off of it and be like, when's the last commit to this thing? So it's actually up in the left corner of my screen for everybody watching. You've probably read it by now. It is the Splunk Cloud Attack Range. So, Jose, I'm going to start with you. What is the range? How did it come to be? Like, what do we use it for? Like, tell us about the Cloud Attack Range.
Yeah. I'll tell you the history, like the long history short, or long history long. It all started way about 2 years ago. I rejoined Splunk. So this is actually my second tour of duty here. The first time around, I left to do a startup because I got bit by that bug, and we ended up selling it. And a friend was like, "Hey, you want to come back?" We bought all these companies. We're trying to figure out so we bought Phantom, we have bought Caspida, and we're trying to figure out how do we put a common use case, how do we throw the common use cases out across all these different products. And so that was the problem. Like, hey, come help us solve this, right? That was the problem. And in solving that problem, I realized the precursor to that is how do we properly test our things? Like forget putting some detections out across all these products. Like, how do we even properly know they're working how we expect them to work, right? And so that's where back when it's 2 years ago when I started, another team member had joined that had a lot of knowledge and background work that he had done with adversary emulation, trying to do this stuff in Riot Games, right? He was doing this, and Russ actually, he's one of the main contributors if you look at the attack traits. And Russ had bought all this emulation work he had done in Riot Games, and I had a bunch of old, the first time I was how to build infrastructure with Splunk and put it together and in an automated fashion, right, at scale. I've done a bunch of that work that actually our version 1 of our cloud for Splunk Cloud was built on top of those Ansible playbooks. And we kind of married both of our projects, and that was version 1 of the attack range. Version 1 of the attack range was all local. You're running it in Vagrant and VirtualBox, and it was just, again, the whole goal was we just want to test our detections. Are they working? Can we launch attacks repeatedly and then make sure they work with that attack that we're launching? But it quickly evolved, the local one, it quickly evolved. It's man, we really need something that scales. This thing on a local machine, I can't spin more than one instance off. It my Mac would feel like I was frying eggs if I had 3 servers trying to emulate anything decent size. So at that time, Patrick, another member of the team, which I'm sad he's not here, so he couldn't make it. He's actually put his garbage on it, and so he's like, this code can be much better improved. And he built what we call the actual official attack range. So if you go to like Splunk attack range, and since the beginning we built this with the intent of like being a tool that we use for ourselves, but like the purpose behind it was like, hey, can we run this in a CI job replicably? Because a lot of the ranges out there that you see, Danny, and to your point, like there's 101 of them, is for you to build it up and use it ad hoc. Like you're using it and you're launching the attack and you're seeing what comes back. Like, we didn't want that. We want to automate the whole thing. Like I want to commit a detection and I want some system to come back and tell me, yeah, look, I tested this detection with this set of attacks and I know it passes. I don't want to think about spinning it up and maintaining it and troubleshooting it. So Patrick turned this thing into an actual first like a real project, right? Like it fleshed out the code, made it a lot cleaner, built a CLI on top of it, and then we built a CI job essentially that triggers it, right? Or the batch AWS batch job that triggers it and does that work. But as he was designing this, we were thinking, one of the biggest things that we lack in our current environment in the attack range right, today is we're bringing up instances that are just like endpoints in an AWS environment, right? In a VPC, and that's great to test endpoint detections. It's great to test anything that happens in that VPC. It's horrible at testing the actual, we weren't thinking about like testing actual serverless components of AWS. That's where the cloud attack range came from. How do we test detections against an environment that's just serverless? Like it doesn't have any actual endpoints anywhere, right? You're using EKS, so like Elastic, that was a Kubernetes service. I think that's what it's called. Either way, there's like a Fargate, I think it's like, so DynamoDB, all these like serverless components that you're using AWS services, but they still get attacked. How do we test these things replicably? So that's the long story of like how the cloud attack range came to be. He wrote a proof of concept with Bobbin, another team members, presented it in Conf last year, and like everything that again, one of the things I strive for our team to accomplish is we always ask like whether we should. We don't ask whether we should open source it. The default should be like, yes, it's going to be open source. I want our work to be shared with the community since we borrow so much from the community, right? And the community I grow on top of that. So most of the arguments is like, why should this be closed source on my team, not the other way around? Which is I intend to. It's a hard argument to keep around Splunk because for a long time, I don't know, for a long time Splunk wasn't very open source friendly, but I think in the last 3 years that's changed tremendously, also, which has really allowed us, enabled us, right, to give out some of these things for free, which is awesome.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I know at least for me, having been out there as a practitioner and things like that, I didn't really start hearing about too much out of Splunk until kind of they picked up Phantom and things like that. So, I mean, you have other vendors out there that are synonymous with open source, like Netflix, right? Like they have their whole Simian army, and like we've known about that for years. Like that's always been a really awesome thing for them to hang their hat on. So that's why I thought it was super important to get all of you on, is because now once there's like kind of an about face, and now we're like, okay, we weren't this before and now we are. How do we get that word out? They're like, yes, now we're actually putting a premium on this and we want people to know about it. Like it can be
massive. Like I'm looking at like the projects that we've been now sponsoring. Like, we're now sponsoring major like Open Telemetry, right? The effort. Like I've read the other day, like we're like one of the major sponsors for Open Telemetry. And that kind of blew my mind. I'm like, wait, what? How does this happen? Like Splunk? Like,
right.
Most of the teams are like here. Just awesome.
Yeah, that was one of those things when I back in November when I was doing my rounds of interviews here, I was doing research and asking people who worked here, like, hey, what are the big concentrations now? Like what are they into? And like that was one of the first things, like, because you didn't know, which I didn't. One of the biggest contributors to that. So tell me, Keith, how does Red Canary play into this?
Yeah, I mean, we get no credit for playing into any of the stuff that you all have done. Obviously, I think the common thread has just been like wanting to keep trying to use Atomic Red Team, which unlike a lot of your open source stuff, like Atomic Red Team is not software, right? It's just like a place to collect tests, and obviously it's structured in a way so that it can support being integrated into software. And so I think everybody here except for me has some sort of practical experience doing that. But so that's kind of I think that's been the tie-in, is just like trying to figure out how do we get a lot of leverage by consolidating the tests, making that really reusable. So whether you're building like adversary simulation or emulation tools, or whether it's just like part of a continuous testing system, like all these use cases, and then just continuing to make sure that like that project really like grows and evolves to continue to support those, right? That's like that's probably the most useful thing that we can do as a community, is just kind of continue to like keep like things in one place so that we're not having to like fork those, to use a terrible open source, like unnecessarily. And so that's really it. And again, that's kind of how we got to talking about this. It was super, super neat to see like how all your tooling and like content project, attack range, stuff like that have integrated Atomic. So
Yeah, for sure. So I will throw this one to Michael. Say somebody is watching this right now. They came across it over the Splunk Twitter and went to YouTube, and now they're watching this and they're like, "Ooh, cloud attack! That's something that I might be into or need." What is, for a team that has a lot of their, I guess let me go back to speaking like a practitioner. What is the maturity level that you would look for in a team to be like, yes, you would be able to, like, is this entry friendly? Is this for a more mature team that kind of has a lot of these processes documented already? What's like the learning curve to kind of to be able to use this effectively?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of it's going to be sort of a little bit of middle of the road between entry and kind of already off the ground. Entry, because an organization that has yet to either begin cloud testing or testing things in the cloud, validating logs, getting things into a SIM, this is where like an attack range can come in and help you with that. You might have organizations, I was previously in a place where organizations all over the place are spinning up AWS instances, but who knows if they're doing anything right? How do we know how to secure the cloud? What does it look like? What do the logs look like? And all that. So that's where this can help, a small InfoSec team or even a medium-sized team to kind of get spun up and actually start testing AWS or cloud instances and environments. And that's where like Atomic comes in as well, right? It's easy to use. I can go and pull a couple tests out and just run those, and then I got my validation, whether we have coverage for it or not. So it's all kind of beginning and medium.
For sure. Is it specific to just AWS, or if, like, say somebody has, they use primarily like Google Cloud, or they use Azure or something like that, is this only applicable to AWS, or could you use this across different cloud providers?
I believe, Jose, correct me if I'm wrong, we have Azure support in here as well, right?
We have Azure support on the regular attack page, not on cloud yet.
Okay.
Yeah, so again, cloud specific is going after serverless component logging and testing those kind of detections. And there we haven't built Azure support. But the goal is, as we keep writing these detections, we focus mainly on AWS. That's what we see most of our customers are leveraging, and even ourselves, right? So yeah, like the goal is always to expand across other providers, but right now that's not what we have on cloud attack range specifically.
Right. And before this came along, what kind of time investment was it for a team or just one person that wanted to do this kind of thing to get the same kind of ROI on their efforts? Like, to do everything that you've built up in here, how long would it have taken somebody before this thing came along to build something from scratch?
It's a hard thing to quantify, because like just again under the hood, if you start looking at just the Atomic Red Team tests specifically, not the attacks, right, themselves, and putting a library that just takes such a long time, right? Making it testable, but building on top of that, like I think building a proper environment before we had this tool, when our team had to go build some detections, to build an environment that's replicable, it would take us like 2 to 3 days easily, and then that's another 2 to 3 days afterwards to build the actual detection test it, confirm it, commit it, right? So you're looking about a week's time from like start of like development to like end for a detection or a handful of detections. It's a long time.
Yeah.
Like we wanted these things to be done in hours, not days, right?
Right. No. And it's thinking back to now, for like I said, for me on its face, 8 years doesn't seem like a long time, but in security, that's a lifetime. So when you see things like this that, before like would have been even like triaging an incident, right. And being able to pull logs from different places and things like that, was weeks, was days, was weeks. And now you have things like this. Like, it really blows my mind. What's the hardest part about keeping something like this maintained, right? So I have a lot of my friends that run other companies, or, they maintain open source software, things like that, and just get barraged with like requests and like bug fixes and passive aggressive comments and why'd you do it like this? I could have did it like this. Like, what's the hardest part about maintaining something like this?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. It'd be great to get like Adam's thoughts on this too. We're actually, like, the group of us were just chatting about this the end of last week. I mean, I know, like, even on the, like, to say nothing of like all the moving parts that you all have on the Splunk side, like even just the debate about like how do you structure these tests, and like they're fundamentally different from others, and that like you've got third-party libraries, and you got all, like, it's just it's even just the simple act of like documentation is more complex. And I don't know, Adam, what your thoughts are on like how to deal with the maintenance aspects of that, but it's like,
yeah, that's one of the things we all bump into. It's easy enough to write a command and throw it into Atomic Red Team and say, good luck, everybody. But then you start to talk about what are prerequisites. And then the bigger one, what does success look like? And can you even determine success? And then that's decoupled from the execution framework. And then it's just turtles all the way down. And when you start to get into the more advanced stuff, not just like, I want to make a command line test and then run it on a Linux box or whatever, you start to bump into places, especially with the cloud stuff, where you're like, well, MITRE attack as a thing is pretty organic. And a cloud especially, we kind of bumped up against some of the edges of that. And now it's a lot of collaboration with the MITRE team of, hey, I think we need some more technique IDs because there's some stuff here that doesn't quite maybe work. And so it's, even if you're just trying to get started, and then all the way from crawl, walk, run up to, okay, we actually need to have like MITRE give us some more boxes in this grid. It can be really challenging, especially for folks who just want to do a drive-by contribution. It's like, oh, I didn't even think about all these other parts that someone else might need to get it running in their environment. And so it's trying to help those folks along too. It can be very tricky and overwhelming if you don't commit time to it.
I gotta echo that. Like, one of the toughest calls I think I've ever had to get on because of our stuff being open source, it was actually a contributor who forked the attack breach and added a library to check where the passwords, like it added an entire section to which is a library that he wrote to manage credentials on, like, which is safekeeping, because the original attack breach, like, very bad security practice, like we hard coded some credentials and they said like, hey, change it, Mr. Customer, when you go configure this, right? So obviously that's not good practice, but it was like version 0, right? Like we now have mechanisms where like we avoid that at all costs, right? But anyway, this person gave us this PR, but it changed the structure of the entire project, made installation a lot more difficult, and it was a very tough call for me because I was like, thank you, but I'm not gonna merge this in. This is gonna make the project just a lot more complicated than it needs to be, right? And I get what you're trying to prove here. This is the 3 other ways we solved it, right? And saying that broke my heart because, again, I built a lot of stuff. Yeah, the tools are built mainly for us to use it, but I'm sharing with the community, right? We got to stay on top of this. And sharing with the community means taking feedback from the community and then also like fixing things that the community tells you, hey, this is broken, as soon as you can. Like, it's Danny, you may see some of the stuff like online. I'm a hawk on like issues and our channels, like, for the most part. Like, I try to respond as fast as I can because, you want to fix some of this stuff. Like, when somebody's complaining, hey, this stuff is broken and it's free, I don't know. I take a personal pride in it being not broken.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And as a matter of fact, like, you might even be more responsive than the people who have projects that other people are paying for. And they're like, we already have your subscription for the month. Like, we'll get to it. But yeah, I mean, you want it to be useful because so much of this stuff can quickly become, not useless, but so cumbersome, and it just grows into this gross, duct taped behemoth that like a small wind will blow over. What would you say is like? So we had touched on a little bit earlier about how it's a relatively new thing for us at Splunk to like you mentioned in the past 3 years or so to really be a contributor to things like this and be very active. And I mean, God, once Splunk got active, they're super active. What would you think are maybe some of the hurdles for other companies that might have teams that want to start doing more open source things, but maybe they're running into, I mean, I don't know, legal things, or like, is there any good God, I hate using best practices. I was in marketing for like 5 months and then that's it. What are maybe some good pieces of advice for maybe teams that want to start contributing to open source but might be hitting some walls within their leadership?
I think there's like, to your point, not to use the word best practice, right? There's probably best practice for like large corporations, e.g., like and like smaller like startups. I think you can be a lot more flexible with like open source projects as a startup. I want to say that, like, and what I mean in that sense is like getting sued. The bigger you are, the more likely it's gonna happen. Like, and so like one of the things like going back, sorry, legal. You mentioned legal, and this is one of the biggest concerns for large corporations. So, hey, I want to go get this out for free, and the first thing they think legally is like, oh, liability, right? One of our saving graces here, I think again, I recommend this as a good practice. We have this thing called a open source committee, an OSS board, and it was here in place the moment when I joined. I think it had just recently been put together, but they had a very simple like step-by-step process of like how to get an open project open source. Here's 5 steps. Like, go clone this like questionnaire, send us this questionnaire, and then they create like a Jira ticket, sets of tickets out of that, and individuals for like legal, marketing, branding are all assigned to this individual tickets. Like, they all review it. Once it's done, you're off. You can go open source, right? And I thought that was very cool. One, it was easy to follow. Two, it wasn't super cumbersome because I knew when things were stuck and by whom and who will have concerns about open sourcing, right? And that. But again, large corporation process. I don't think, I don't know, a smaller company would need necessarily a process that rigid.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, just as an addition to that, it is very tricky. I mean, I at this point, my job is help large org make open source a thing, right? And so, that's what we deal with at Red Canary. And as great as it is that organizations can work together or build off of other folks' frameworks and just ask, like, hey, how do you all open source stuff? What does your process look like? How many legal approvals do you need to? Like, it is awesome that an organization can support that. It's definitely easier for the small ones. But what we found is that there's some organizations who just like can't, especially large financials. The moment they think about publishing something, the attorneys come and black bag the engineers and put them into a basement for a while. And be like, you think about what you've done. Right. You do not get to do this. And so it's easy for us to say as kind of forward-thinking industries and saying like, oh yeah, we there's processes and we make sure that hopefully somebody owns open source projects for a given organization or something to that degree. There are some folks who just like can't, no matter how hard they try. That stinks, especially because they tend to be larger, really like bleeding edge organizations from a security standpoint. So it's a shame. I'd love to see what some folks would publish if they could.
Right, and it also it's not lost on me that there's this project is two of the biggest things that the oldest chestnuts that I've seen kicked around in security is, one, people are afraid of cloud. 2, people are horrified of open source. And this thing is both of them, which makes it, I think, an even nobler effort. Should people be and now I'm going to put my, like, somebody who's not in, like, initiated into security type hat on, the whole thing is like, cloud is just somebody else's computer. Do you see that being more acceptable now? Like, I remember back then when I worked for another company and we had a SaaS type thing, and it was cloud only. Like, to make it on-prem was like, would need 7 trucks to get on there every day. Do you see cloud being more acceptable now to people, or do you still see what companies that are just super risk averse to it still? And that's for any of you, Michael or Jose.
Yeah, I'll take a quick pass, which is that I mean, I mean, for a long time, especially, gosh, I mean, like Red Canary started when like EDR was brand new, and like our first infrastructure we built like on like actual old school iron because we figured no one would ever send their data to their cloud, and like now that's kind of like it's the only option for a lot of folks, right? And not only that, I think like just looking a lot of like high profile like security incidents, also just like all the day-to-day security incidents that like we see with like IR partners and stuff. Like um it, there's something to be said for turning your own wrench, but there's also something to be said for like letting Google or Microsoft host your email, because like they have people who specialize and they can do a better job than like most organizations can do on their own, right? And so like purely from a security standpoint, I think like organizations like a lot of newer companies, it's like it's their only option. Like they don't have like Red Canary doesn't have a place to put computers, like other than like the one that I'm on right now. Right? They don't. It's not even an option, even if we wanted it. And so, um, and then yeah, from a security standpoint, it's just I mean centralizing like control, visibility. Like you can thwack an entire class of vulnerabilities in an hour with a SaaS application where it would take the long tail of months or years for people to patch with like on-prem stuff, right? So I don't know, that like that would be my take on it, is like it's definitely becoming like way more pervasive, and I think for the right reasons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're definitely in a bit of a curve too, because it is that thought of, well, by default, which is more secure, an email server I install or one that Microsoft hosts for me, right? Well, it's pretty easy, but for when it comes to like the cloud infrastructure, there's definitely a blip in that radar where, oh, I spun up a cloud infrastructure, and yes, Amazon engineers are watching it. Are they? And also, your meaningful defaults is everything's open by default, and I just made a bunch of things that anyone can do anything to. So I think we're coming out of the tail end of that, but I would be intrigued to hear what the Splunk folks thinks about that assessment.
Well, yeah, I mean, we were just talking about Jose, like hard coded credentials and not changing things. I am horribly guilty. I don't spin up as many as I used to, but my God, I would just spin things up and like that default code. Nobody's gonna go looking for this, and I do this professionally.
We did a Black Hack Arsenal talk last year, Rod and I, on a tour I wrote exactly for this, because I was doing this. I'm like, I'm sure other developers are doing this exact mistake, right? So like we wrote like this like Git scripter essentially to script credentials for like all cloud providers and like Kubernetes, all that stuff. It's pretty fun. It was 300,000 credentials I think we collected over like API keys like from different providers.
Yeah,
Major corporations.
yeah, or just like like just open S3 buckets of like I can do anything I want to this thing, and oh look, this is a bank that I won't actually say the name of, but yeah, like that stuff is crazy. So we got like 5 minutes left. For anybody that may have stumbled across this and is watching it and like has their interest peaked on this, but they're not quite familiar with cloud, but they want to get familiar with things like AWS and doing more security type things there. And I'll ask Michael first, where would you direct somebody who is on a team that is not cloud mature but wants to be, to get up to speed and learn things quickly? Do you have resources? Do you have favorite sites, stuff like that? Be like, listen, if you really want to get really get good at this, go and check out these things.
Yes, I think probably looking at either AWS training, just anything that's kind of out there. There's so much free stuff now. I think on the attack side, it's on our page there for Attack Range Cloud. It's the Leonidas project. I think that's a really good tool to really get you started. There's another one from Rhino Security that helps people get started with like just attacking AWS. I think it's a really good way to audit, just to kind of see what things are and how they work and what logs come out of it, just to get started. I think the other nice part is if you have the ability to deploy a cloud attack range and generate that telemetry yourself in a safe way, that's your best bet. Besides, going off and using something like that recently released AWS Nuke project. I don't want to blow up your corporate account.
I haven't even heard about that one, but I'm going to go look at that right after this is done.
Yep, not on our account. But but yeah, I think kind of that's where it's all like at right now. There's more and more coming out every day, right? If you just troll around on Twitter long enough, you start finding random people generating projects to just help test and red team cloud stuff, and it's all just helping everybody at that point. And there's just a lot of open source to get it all going here.
Yeah, there is one dude, and I think I remember his name. Oh, yeah, he's with CrowdStrike now. I thought he used to be with Rhino. Spencer Geetson, I think that's who. Yeah, no, yeah, he Spencer was with Rhino for about 3 years. Now he is with CrowdStrike. So Spencer is like, he's one of those. So I briefly worked at AWS. I was there for like 5 seconds. So I saw a lot of this firsthand, and going through some of the documentation. While they have well written as far as the English language goes, a lot of it is like, here's this version, and then here's this revision, and here's this thing over here. So there's that there can be kind of a high learning curve for that. But yeah, there's a lot of really great accounts. Like Spencer's one of those dudes who I've followed for years. Jose, how about you? If somebody came up to you and was like, how do I start approaching this and get good? You have any favorite resources, anything?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the goal, but like typically Rhino, I really like the work out of Rhino. I've used some of their tools and some demos in the past. They really go deep into some of the problem sets. It depends on, as a defender, somebody put me in a SOC, hey, go protect AWS or protect a cloud instance. It depends on what our assets are and what I'm going after, but like again, making sure you have MITRE coverage is always a good, doesn't mean it has to be perfect, but it's always a good first starting place. And then from there you can divulge into like what tools give me this testability, what, how do I emulate this attack, how, what's some sample detections out there for this kind of stuff. Unfortunately, I don't see a whole lot of like, which, by the way, that's exactly what we're trying to solve with cloud attack range. I don't see a whole lot of like cloud detections publicly available yet. There's a handful sprinkled in the Sigma rule set. There's a handful sprinkled in the Elastic rule set open source, and a handful more in Azure, but there hasn't been, I don't think, a concerted effort yet. Like, we don't have as deep of a benchmark across the board like we do for endpoint, for example. Where all of us, like the companies I mentioned, we're pretty deep in endpoint, I think, in this regard. So there's an opportunity there to help people get up started. But if I was starting from scratch, Cloud Matrix, just to figure coverage, and then look at some of the attacks or potential attacks that Rhino's releasing. Specifically Twitter accounts. I really like that the FRR report, even though they don't necessarily talk a whole lot about cloud stuff there specifically, because it's more like incident response on the endpoint after something happened. But sometimes you get a good glimpse into some of the reports of like how something got a foothold, and it usually happens to like some sort of cloud provider, and that gives you hints like, this is the stuff I want to be looking at.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, sorry.
No, awesome. And I'm going to ask one more question to either Jose or Michael. Would you rather fight 100 duck-sized AWS security engineers or one horse-sized AS400 sysadmin?
I know my answer.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
One horse-sized AS400.
Really? You would want to fight one grizzled, gray-beard, horse-sized sysadmin?
Any day. The numbers. You lose in pure numbers. Yeah. 1,000, what do you say, 100 duck-sized engineers?
Yes,
stabbed by like little like.
Fair enough. And they're taking all their aggressions out on you for like all the snarky comments on their software.
All of a sudden, you're that printer in Office. What is it called? Office Space? No, what was that? What was that movie called?
Oh yeah, it was the dot matrix. Or is it dot matrix? Yeah, from Office Space. Oh, okay, I get it. Fair enough. All right. Well, that was the dopiest question I could possibly come up with to close this episode out. For anybody that wants to learn more about this stuff, about the Splunk cloud attack range, where can they go?
Sorry, Mike. I was there, so they can go to GitHub. It's probably the best, easiest, most up-to-date place.
Cool.
Splunk specifically under GitHub/Splunk/Cloud Attack Range or Attack Range Cloud.
All right.
Underscores instead of spaces.
Awesome. And if somebody wanted to follow any of you on the Twitters, start with Michael.
At M_Haggis, Haggis.
Cool. Jose?
At Devious, and that's D1VIOUS.
I'm going to, in the magic of post-production, have that go right above there. It's going to scroll across.
It doesn't roll off the tongue. Let's just
right
leave
there.
it.
It's, dude, like, that's the thing. Like, we all have, like, those elite spellings of our handles, and they're like, all right, get a pen, because this one's going to be long. Keith.
My password, too.
Yeah, it just makes it convenient. Keith, yours is super hard to remember. It's at what?
At KWM is easy. I had the benefit of working with an early Twitter employee, so I had an unfair advantage in the short handle game.
Yeah, there you go. And Adam, if people wanted to get a hold of you or chat to you.
I'm at Adam_Mashinchi, which is both easy and difficult depending on if you can spell Mashinchi. The trick is mash like the TV show, inch like the measurement, and then the letter I. So Adam_Mashinchi.
Well, for once, and thank God I did it, is I actually have all of your names up on the screen this entire time. So it's literally right there. So we don't have to like explain that later. Well, dude, thank all of you guys for coming. Sorry about the usual technical difficulties, but I think we got through this, and people are probably watching this on the YouTube playlist right now. So go down the playlist. We have some other episodes. Check those out. We're going to have a lot more coming up in March. And if you care about me tweeting about mountains of meat on sandwiches, mine is at DAKACKI. And even if you don't, sometimes I tweet useful security stuff. So thank you, fellows, for hanging out. And I will speak to you guys soon.